first I want to address that we're going to touch on some tough topics. There's been a conflict, and I hope we resolve it by the end. There is a lot of disinformation about the topic child sexual abuse, trafficking, and abuse. And we're going to talk about it from the survivor stories to our version of it and what we've explained to you about how we won our case. First, address this social utility complaint form through the FCC and the copyright. And if you file your complaint with the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, on these issues, how they're blocking people from posting things, please go ahead and file a complaint with the Attorney General's office. This way we can illustrate what's going on in the court system, because there's a lot of things happening in the system that won't allow people to discuss this case or these cases, and a lot of times for the right reasons, but there's a lot of things that happen on social media that we would like to clear up. And first of all, I think there has been a conflict of interest in these cases because we know that there are victims, and obviously the families need to be represented properly, and a lot of times that's been the problem. Let's start there. I just want to post this up for a forum that I really believe will possibly or may possibly happen for those who really want to file consumer complaints about their pages or posts being blocked. I've had debates with people on Facebook. They think it's our fault that this is happening. And the thing is anytime you talk on the topic regarding pedophilia, NAMBLA, sexual abuse, Pinkygate, Elsagate, Pizzagate, Pedogate, anything that enters into a gateway, anything that's about pedophilia, this is what we go through, okay? The thing is, for me, and many people like you, we won our case in 1985. The pedophile went to jail. So I really don't even know why they would argue with me, because we've won our case. He's dead and gone. He passed away. And we're waiting for the state of Pennsylvania to make a decision on window legislation. That's where I'm at. So anything that I've learned in this, one thing I can say, that it's hard to dig away the topic and make comparisons one case to another. That is the truth. And anytime you talk on pedophilia, there's ways that people want to debunk it. They don't want to deal with the elephant in the room. And if they do, I'm sorry. That's not for me to tell them how to believe or not to believe. I mean, I think they'll poo-poo this idea, but listen, every time a reporter or somebody goes near this topic, something happens to their career. I can't explain that. This is God intervening for our children. And let me say how the one of the things that people do not want to ignore, because the investigation's a huge part of this, is the cases where they would log this information, but it would disappear. This has been an issue. Okay, now listen, I didn't get into this like through the back door. This all happened gradually over a period of my lifetime, where this woman would be screaming at me, yelling at me. I mean, she was terrorized by the fact that her son was being sent wherever on weekends. And that started years ago. So when I hear people argue with me, and I know what we were dragged into, we didn't want to be dragged into anything. That's the danger of arguing with people, because they have to make an informed decision. When you know a child or children go missing, and they want to argue with us, and I'm giving them all the resume, all the credentials, it doesn't matter. My thing is, I know the risk and danger personally. I know what it was like to starve in a home where there was no care or necessities given to the children. I know the severity of the neglect and the ability to starve your children out. And then what it does is it creates this environment. If you can starve or neglect your family, it makes them susceptible to everything. You're vulnerable to everything. If somebody's going to give you food, in fact, Stalin showed that you could drive somebody to the point of poverty and desperation, and that's how they gave in. Meaning, if you were starved in a situation, which we lived it. We were starved in it. Okay, we were so severely neglected. I had eczema, and there were situations, and there was roaches coming out of places you would not believe. So when people argue with me, I know the extremes. I know what people are willing to do if they want to get their way. And if it means stealing off their own family, if it means abusing their own children, that's how it really is. And I don't know that all these people are fully aware of that. All they know at the time is because they have been, in a way, indoctrinated, believe it or not. They don't want to believe what happened to them. They don't want to believe that they took part in it. And that is the mind control. Because up to this point, I didn't know anything. I was only a kid. But I could see where the mind control was generational, okay? And what I mean by that, and I'm going to explain it in a way that people make sense of it. I've got to explain what my mother went through. My mom grew up in a neighborhood, affluent. They were connected. All you heard was the Mellons, the Rockefellers. That's all you heard about growing up. That was my upbringing. So that, I believe that set me up. The difference was I had a Christian father who sharpened me and taught me things that most of the time I don't think my mom was aware of it. My dad was more of the, he was the kind of guy that played football and different from my mother. But my mother, who I think in a lot of ways, it's not that she was naive at all. I don't think she was fully aware of what she was growing up around. And I think that's why her and my dad got along. Because my dad was a lot more grounded. My mom kind of, she grew up going to a school where there was an academy. And, she had maids and people did for my mother. My mom really didn't do for herself. And most of the time, when you're raised like that, people do for you. They don't teach you basic, 101, like just the basics of life. So my dad was different from my mom. And one of the things is, so I had a little bit of both my parenting. My mother being from an affluent family connected to my dad who was more down to earth, okay? So it put me in an interesting position because I could see things that my dad pointed out. And I think that's because he sharpened me and he showed me things and he trained me because he was a Marine Corps. And my mother being from an affluent home, that's all you heard about is the Mellons and the Rockefellers and this and that. And they were, that was the exposure I had. But up until that point, I didn't experience the things. And it just seemed like as soon as my dad was out of the picture, they attacked my family in a way that I can't explain. And my mom, I don't know who my mom talked to that day, but my mom, being as naive as she was in a lot of ways, trusted the wrong people. Really, that's because I don't know who talked my mother into leaving my sisters at a daycare center for 2 weeks. But it turned out he was a registered pedophile. And when you have a story like that, and then and my mom didn't have a fighting chance, truthfully. She didn't. No one was fighting for my mom or my dad. So my parents both being in the situation where you got 6 kids, and that oftentimes you hear these stories where kids are shipped off to foster homes and things like that. That was no different, okay? That was the story. And what happened is when we went into that foster home, they continued the abuse. Okay, so when I see these articles, whether it's on Facebook and it's being blocked on my Facebook page, I got to speak to it because this has been going on with orphans and foster children. I'm just going to lay it out. You could argue Pizzagate doesn't exist. I can't speak to that specifically, but there are stories that don't add up. And let me tell you, when I found my sister in a corner for 3 hours, blocked, and then literally blocked with a sewing box around her for 3 hours, it was the caseworkers and myself and many people that got us out. I mean, if it hadn't been for the actions of the caseworker, we would not have gotten out of the foster home. And it was a grueling month. From July and August, we finally were exiting that foster home to another foster mother. And luckily my foster mother can attest to this because she too went through it. But listen, there are people that want to argue with us. The thing is, they actually shut these orphanage programs down. They shut them down and they start them up with something else. And most of it's all connected to the church organizations, these faith-based organizations. And just recently, August 2015, the same thing happened again. What ended up happening is the staff walked in and found these kids sexually molested again and again. And we're here in Western Pennsylvania, and you've seen it at the Second Mile program, and you see it on and on and on. So I don't have time to argue with you guys whether it's Pizzagate. When I find kids that are taped down with their hand, I know what's going on. It's a form of child pornography. truly, I don't think a lot of people understand how serious this case is because they don't see the degree of ritual sexual abuse. They don't understand, and they want to argue with us, and they want to point out facts. And let me say this, we want our case, so I'm not here to argue with you. I'm trying to give you maybe some help here on some things. But a lot of people, I don't understand this. It's like they're tunnel vision, and they don't want to listen. They have their mind made up about the direction they're going in. And that's fine, because I don't want them to lose their train of thought. I'm pointing out to those people that love to argue with us for no reason at all. I don't know who you're arguing with, because I'm not here to argue with you guys. Okay? I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just pointing out what has happened. And there are case after case where people are trafficking children, and we're seeing them, and we're seeing case after case and arrest after arrest, and you want to argue just because it's not on mainstream news. I'm sorry, they don't report this. I don't think they're trained to report it, to be honest with you. You're not going to see it on your Facebook feed because they block it. And I'm not going to argue with people on my Facebook page. Block me. Ignore me. Unsubscribe. I'm not here to argue with you guys. I'm telling you, we won the cases. If I was, I could have never seen myself in a position I was in. I've actually had friends just say, I don't want to talk to you about it. Well, then that's fine. Then we're not friends. I don't know what to say. If you're not my friend, you're not my friend. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend. I'm telling you guys that you guys are helping people like us. That's the point. If you care enough about these kids, you're helping people like me. To me, if you help those little kids, you're helping me. Because it's those little kids that I was related to. They're adults now, and they have children, and they have families. And it's really hard to talk to people. Luckily, people are empathetic and sympathetic and understand that when you hear about child pornography and a child that's raped at 11 years old, and there's cameras everywhere, and they are performing for these adults, you are in a different category. We're in a different category altogether. When I talked to these kids and they were molested and passed around and held down and raped multiple times, and now they're adults, and they were gang raped several times, and you have, and all the time you have with me, the little bit of time you have with me, and all you're going to do is argue. Time is too short. I don't have time to argue with you guys. Okay? I care too much about these kids, and I care too much to bring a voice to it. And listen, whether people help us or I want this message out for their sake, for my sake, for the sake of it, because we've already been through missing persons issues before, several different times. We're asking you guys, bring a voice to this. There's no argument here. We don't want you to pretend this doesn't happen. It's happening everywhere. The problem is we don't have to prove a thing. We won our case, That's the blessing in all this. We don't have to argue. We're here, we want to give you maybe a way to look at it from the aspect of not trying to prove the case, but how to help the victims, because really, part of winning this case is helping the victims. That's how it really works. And that means being consistent and supportive and encouraging each other, not just back and forth. I don't know if we got on the wrong page with a few people, but I really didn't want to get on the wrong page. And that's the point I was trying to make, okay? I hope we made that clear. For some reason or another, there's a constant misunderstanding. And maybe we're speaking a different language. I don't know. I'm not trying to be difficult at all. I just wanted to illustrate that because it just seems like there's a lot of things going on the internet that will purposely block us. And I don't have to prove that in itself.